Hi, I'm Andrew from Travel Photos, and for those who know me, yeah, I'm not wearing my normal black polo shirt with logo Travel Photos on it because today is Saturday, it's meant to be my day off. So, what am I doing? Well, last night, late Friday night, I saw a kind of an impromptu video, an ad hoc video, possibly recorded on a laptop by Tony Northrup. Tony Northrup, he's big on YouTube for his photography. I don't think he's famous for his photography, but he's famous for his photography education videos. And it looked a bit weird. It didn't look like the normal Tony Northrup quality production, so I clicked on it and was shocked. The big news is DPReview is going to be not so much closed but deleted. That's a major, major shock announcement for people in the photography industry. Let me explain why. A little bit of context, a little bit of nostalgia, and a little bit of pride and joy show as well. Okay, so this is actually the first camera that I have ever had. It's a Seagull, license made Minolta, really. And I got this in the early 1990s. In those days, if you wanted information about a camera, you had to go to the camera store, ask questions of the salesperson. The salesperson will always tell you their sales pitch. Like, yeah, it's great, it's wonderful, it'll do magic and everything. And you just had to trust them, buy the thing, try it out, and then talk to your friends and say, oh yeah, get this, or oh no, don't get this. That's how you got information prior to the internet about cameras. As it turns out, the mechanics of this are absolutely terrible, but as a student camera of the time, it was good enough. The lens, amazing. Of course, it's like Minolta quality. Minolta is considered probably the second best lens in the history of humanity, lenses. Second only to Leica. I'll tell you more about that later. So this is my first camera. That was the situation with buying cameras and lenses before the internet. And then I upgraded eventually a few times, and this is the last film camera I have ever bought. This is the Minolta Alpha 7, or as is known in North America, Maxim 7, in the UK, Dynex 7, and I believe here in Australia, Dynex 7 as well. Amazing camera, absolutely amazing film camera. I don't think there'll ever be a film camera better than this. The features that it had took years into the digital era to start to replicate. So this is the first to be able to fire flashes remotely, not with a radio signal, but with an optical signal. And you can set the flashes to different power strengths and to fire off at slightly different times, which is great if you're doing, say, sports action photography. It had advanced features that are amazing. And so in 1998 is when DPReview was published, and it was an era when I think Kodak wrapped up their consumer digital camera era. They experimented with digital cameras and decided to end it. They stuck with film to their demise. They had a head start on Canon, Nikon, and Minolta, which were the major camera brands of the time, and they gave that up. And with the transition into digital, Canon and Nikon picked up on that quickly, and I think they did really well. And so I did a trip from England, where I was living at the time, to Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and then back to England. I came back to England with like 16 rolls of film, and I forget what I was doing, either putting them in to be processed or picking them up. And while waiting, I'm standing at the counter, and I notice that the memory cards, the computer chip that you can put into the back of the camera was like 70 something pounds. The cost of developing the film from that round Europe trip I did was like 80 pounds. It was a little bit cheaper to get one of those computer memory chips than it is to buy film, develop it, and then scan it for digital. But of course, in that era, what you did with film and for photography was to make prints. And so film was still much better, I think. But I was kind of sold into trying it because I looked at camera communities and photography communities, the early era of the internet, and photo.net was just not that great. There was a lot of people showboating about and blowing their own trumpets and trying to tell everyone else why their photos are terrible and that they should quit. It wasn't a great community. But DPReview was different. It was really different. So with DPReview, I could do things like look up cameras and look at factual information about cameras. So I could do things like look at, this is my first digital camera, my first digital SLR, and the lens is Minolta. I'll tell you more about that later. So I could see like how many megapixels the chip or the sensor inside had. I could see that it had a variable ISO, because with film, you put in one roll of film and that's your ISO for the day. But here, you can take a photo and then change the ISO on the back. It was amazing. And then even more amazing is you could like see the photo on the back. You take the photo and then you can see it immediately. It was amazing. It was wow. Yeah, and so you could look up that kind of factual information. And then I could also see that my Minolta lenses, like this Minolta 50mm, fitted on. Now, this exact lens, 50mm f2.8, f1.4, is part of the first batch of the very first autofocus lenses in human history. Prior to that, you had to do manual focus. That is, you actually had to move the internal bits of the lens until you found focus. Minolta invented autofocus, and yeah, so this particular lens is of the first batch, and Minolta is amazing at lenses. So I'd say this is the second best lens ever made in human history that is not Leica. The best would be the Minolta 100mm macro f2. Amazing, absolutely amazing. I now have Canon, and Canon doesn't have a lens that comes close to the best of Minolta lenses. So I could put a computer chip, or as they call them, memory cards, into here. I can get one for the cost of developing a batch of films, and I could move those digital images from this 6 megapixel camera, and 6 megapixels was amazing at the time, onto the computer, and then I could then I could do developing in that Photoshop program by Adobe. But also importantly, with DPReview, I could look up not just factual information about compatibility of certain equipment, including flashes, but I could also get people's reviews, people's honest reviews. I could see the star rating, like this camera apparently was 5 stars in its time, and I could see people's opinions about it. So there was factual information and a database of opinions about how good it was, what its limitations were, and I think most people who wrote reviews on this would have said that At 100 ISO, it was great, though there was still sometimes noise in certain light conditions, especially in transition areas and shadows. There could still be noise at ISO 100. ISO 200, forget about it. Everything else is bad, but it could still do the job if you had to. It was a database, basically. DPReview was amazing. Had a great community. You could look back at information, and I think from a research perspective, it's going to be a loss, because you could see the transition of the photography community from film into digital, all the arguments, all the discussions. You could see what people have said and the reactions, some of them quite emotional, others quite very supportive. So from a linguistic and historical perspective, DPReview has absolute gold there. From a historical perspective, that database as well, that historical database is amazing. What would be fantastic is if DPReview could continue, so that new factual information can be put there, and so there can be a comparison of brands, of lineages, of lenses, of cameras, of flashes, so you can see the development of, let's say, Tamron. Tamron used to be quite meh, but now they're really good. You could see the development of, say, Canon. Look at the history of Canon cameras, the factual history of the era, not like written of today's standards, but factual history from the perspective of the people at the time compared to today. You can't do that after DPReview would be deleted. Apparently it's going to be deleted, I think, in the second week of April. I forget when, but it's not good. As a database for information, it's probably second to none, and Amazon are just going to delete it. I love history. Something special about film cameras. Have a very film smell. They just smell great. What I love about film photography, even back in the era, was you could wind on the film. There was that tactile, haptic feeling. And then get your shutter speed set, get your aperture set, and then when you think you've got it all right, make sure the focus is right, and then you would and it'd take a few days until he found out if the exposure was right. Please don't delete DPReview.